welcome to our study of the excellent path to enlightenment. So today is the auspicious Guru Rinpoche day, the 10th day of the waxing moon. Where I'm staying, there will be some sock practice, so I think they're already setting up, so you might hear some noises here and there. I don't think it'll get too rowdy though. So today we are in the, presently we are in the section on taking refuge. So we've looked at the object of refuge, how we take refuge, and the commitments that go with the refuge. Now, like I mentioned last time, and as in fact everybody here who's practicing knows, then when we're doing the ngöndro practice, we're doing this. We begin the actual main ngöndro practice with the taking of refuge, and this we do with the offering of prostrations. And as we do the prostrations, we visualize in front of us the refuge tree. So here we have on your left, we have a refuge tree that was recently painted according to the instructions of Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche. And there in the middle, you have then Guru Rinpoche in the form of Ujin Dorje Chang, Uddiyana Vajradhara. So in the actual teaching here, then the refuge might be explained slightly differently, and you can visualize Guru Padmasambhava how you wish. But anyway, presently in the context of ngöndro, then this is one option of how you can visualize the refuge tree. This is based on the Longchen Nyingtik. So together with Guru Rinpoche here, then as we explained last time, you have in the front the Buddha, then you have to Guru Rinpoche's right the Sangha, and here we see what we call the 8 close sons, the 8 Bodhisattva. Over here you have the Arhats, and behind you have the scriptures. So the Buddha in the front symbolizes then the first jewel of the Buddha. These two here, with the 2 kinds of Sangha, the Mahayana and the Hinayana Sangha, symbolize the Sangha. And then the volumes of scripture in the back symbolize the Dharma, the teaching. And then around you have then the Yidams, the particular Vajrayana, the deities of Vajrayana sadhana practice here, which particularly in the Nyingma tradition is centered around what we call the eight logos, or the 8 great sadhana sections. They're not all represented here, but some of these yidams belong to that section. Mahotra Heruka, Yangdak Heruka, Vajrakilaya, and so forth. And then particularly in the Longchen Nyingtik, then you have what's called the wrathful red guru, over here Guru Tachung Barwa, and over here you have Singye Dongpachen, the lion-faced Dakini, and up here you have then the Avalokiteshvara, Dungal Roundral, and the Dakini Yumkadeshin Gyalmo, and then down here you have protectors of various kinds, particularly what we call Masa Damsum, the Ekajati, Rahula, and Vajrasadhu and Dorje Legpa. And then there's also various others. Up here in the space, then you have the lineage gurus. So anyway, all of you know this, but anyway, this is this particular Tanga. Now, then Khyentse Rinpoche says, in short, the essence of taking refuge is to have complete confidence in the 3 jewels, regardless of life's circumstances, good or bad. So having complete confidence in the three jewels is very different from an act of blind faith. You know, when I grew up, um, I was very interested in religions and sort of what they represented because it was a greater dimension, but you were very often asked to just open yourself to God and everything will be okay. But that's sometimes very difficult when you actually don't really know what God is. And so in the Buddhist teaching, we put a lot of emphasis actually on understanding what is the Buddha, what is the Dharma, what is the Sangha. So presuming that all of you have come thus far and would have ascertained what do we mean with the Buddha, what do we mean with the teachings, and what do we mean with the Sangha, yes, then we can trust. This is not just something about opening ourselves up in some sort of strange religious mystical way, even though I think we all can agree also that could very well work. I actually used to feel a little bit jealous of these people who are able to just open their heart to Jesus or whatever, you know. I might have sort of felt some inner pride, maybe, of sort of guarding my own rationality and so forth. But at the same time, I couldn't help noticing that these people seemed awfully happy. And I would, of course, then have that attitude, well, they're a bit naive or whatever, you know. But there was that sense that, something good does come out of it. But you see, for me, that was based on blind faith, and certainly in Buddhism, we're not big on blind faith. We're very big on not accepting the Buddha, like he said, on the basis of just respect for his person, but on the basis of our own reasoning. But with that, then, having found something that we can trust, and we all know that too, to actually trust when you have somebody who's reliable, a really reliable person, something that just works, one of your tools, it just works. Then there's a sense of joy in the reliability of this. And particularly what we're talking about here is something that extends beyond just maybe the limited use of a tool. It's something that has to do with all aspects in which we engage with our sanity, with our consciousness, our being. And to have something that we can bring into any situation in terms of an innate disposition, an innate quality, such as then what the three jewels embody or what they point to, that provides really a basis for tremendous confidence. And that's where we can talk about something that is unconditionally useful, regardless of life circumstances, to engage with complete wakefulness, clarity, and so forth, the qualities of the three jewels. This is something that enables us to fully experience and also fully integrate everything that happens on the path of awakening. Khyentse Rinpoche then says, if conditions are pleasant or favorable, we should think that this is purely due to the kindness and blessing of the three jewels. Again, here it applies the innate goodness that is basic to the nature of the Buddha Dharma Sangha is something that is lies beyond the scope of the ordinary ego. And so we can talk about kindness in the sense of benevolence or something that extends beyond just the ordinary linear and rational and limited view that ordinarily applies within our existence. And that's where we can then have some sense of greatness and our us being having that awe. Khyentse Rinpoche says, be grateful and dedicate this happiness to all sentient beings, wishing that they too may enjoy such happiness. If we come across difficult circumstances, if we fall sick or lose everything we have, or are criticized or derided, we should bear in mind that the misdeeds we have committed during countless past lives would normally cause us to be born in the lower realms of samsara. Yet through the kindness of the teacher and the three jewels, and through the power of our confidence in them, the sickness and difficulties we are experiencing now are giving us a chance to purify this karmic potential for rebirth in the lower realms. So with that sense of the presence of wakefulness and the goodness and the qualities of the Buddha Dharma Sangha as an innate condition of reality, then we have this continual experience of a vision of something that lies beyond our karmic conditioning. And so there we can very well be patient with whatever happens. So if something good comes our way, of course we should enjoy it, but also wish that others might share these kind of circumstances. And if something negative happens, we can see this as a way of simply exhausting or purifying negative patterns that have already been accumulated in our being. So we don't need to react with attachment when something good comes our way, but simply just expand that joy to embrace others. And we don't need to react with resentment or frustration or aggression when negative circumstances come our way, but simply just understanding cause and effect, understanding that our karma is being purified. And particularly then when there is this vision of that which is greater, then also we have this quality of confidence that we're not just you could say, we're not just held by the constructs of what we're experiencing. There is something that lies beyond that. And so not getting entangled in what we're experiencing, then not only are we exhausting our karma in the sense that then the result is exhausting, but also there's an experience of wisdom. There's an experience of not being held by these circumstances. So we go through difficulties in a very different way when we have this vision and the confidence and the trust, the devotion and so forth. There's something far greater that's present within the experience that we're having. So Khyentse Rinpoche says, we should also pray, through this suffering of mine, may I take on the sufferings of all beings who are enduring similar difficulties. May this difficulty help me to progress on the path to enlightenment. So in that way, there's not the slightest resentment about difficult circumstances. Maintain your reliance on the refuge in all your everyday activities. For instance, when you walk, think that the object of refuge is above your right shoulder and that you're walking around it respectfully. So just like you walk around clockwise a stupa or a holy object or location, then when you do walk clockwise, the object is on your right shoulder. So you can feel free to have this visualization of the object of refuge at that position. Sorry. When you eat, think that you're offering the first part of the food to the three jewels, and then eat the rest as if it had been given back as a blessed substance. So incidentally, then today it is Guru Rinpoche Day, and we're doing tsok, which means actually means a number of things, but it also involves making some offerings. And what we do is we make the offering, and then at the end, then also we, having offered some, then we eat it ultimately as something that's, you could say, been blessed. So this kind of practice of making an offering out of whatever we eat we don't have to make a big fuss. If we're not with Buddhists, then we might not need to chant. We might not need to chant. If we are with Buddhists, then we can sort of be out of the closet and we can chant food offering prayers. There's some very beautiful ones. There's some very general ones. There's some particular beautiful Vajrayana food offerings and so on. But making an offering out of that. When you wear new clothes, first offer them mentally to the three jewels. At night, think that the object of refuge is above your head, bright and vivid, and fall asleep with your mind filled with devotion. So do this according to however your personal disposition. If you're insomniac, then maybe having the object of refuge bright and vivid above your head might not work, but then you could think the essence of the refuge is in your heart. And however works, then we fall asleep then with this inspiration of the presence of the refuge. If you have complete confidence, it's not difficult for the blessings of the three jewels to reach you. If you do not, you close yourself to the blessings. See, that's the thing. If we have that openness, and this goes for all aspects of our life, so this is not, again, something unknown. If we have confidence in somebody, we can really gauge what they're talking about. If we're closed, no matter how intelligent or useful or constructive what this person might be saying, if we're closed, it's just wasted. It's like, water off a duck's back. So we want to have this confidence. Of course, we should arrive at this confidence through, you could say, ascertaining its validity, checking that it's true, it has the qualities that we speak about here. But once that's there, then we shouldn't really be dawdling or hesitating. Then really this should be something that's present within us. And so then there's this dimension of something greater, what we call blessing. The rays of the sun shine on everyone in the world, but they can only set fire to dry grass when concentrated through a magnifying glass. Similarly, if you have the magnifying glass of faith and devotion, the Guru's blessing will blaze forth within you. So in the Vajrayana, then we speak of the Guru really as embodying the three jewels, the three roots, and the three kayas, and hence the Guru has this prominent position in the center of the refuge tree. There are different levels of faith. First, clear faith, Dangwe Deba, refers to the joy and clarity and change in our perceptions that we experience when we hear about the qualities of the three jewels and the lives of the Buddhas and the great teachers. Yeah, we read the life of the Buddha, and there's the play in full in the 84,000, which is the very extensive story of the Buddha's life. There's a few others. There's Thich Nhat Hanh's. Remember, there's old, what is it again? Old Path, White Clouds, I think. Yeah, or we read life stories of the great masters. Depending really on our disposition, we read life stories of the great masters of the Longchen Yingtig, or the various masters in India and so forth. Masters in India and Tibet, we read their stories. Masters in China. One of my favorite life stories is Su Yun, who was a great master who lived from 1839 to the 1950s. He was about 120 when he died. An amazing master, Su Yun, empty cloud. His life story can be found on the internet. But we have great masters, and when we hear these, then it really gives us a sense of vision, purpose, joy. It lights up our experience and so on. So that's clear faith. Then there's longing faith. This is, Khyentse Rinpoche says, is experience when we think about the latter, about these great teachers of the past, and are filled with a great desire to know more about their qualities and to acquire these ourselves. So this is more than just a sort of voyeuristic approach with, oh yeah, they were like that, that's interesting, and what's for dinner? Okay, that's there, but it has nothing to do with my life. This longing faith is when it very much has something to do with our life, and that there's an urging in the life stories that are saying, come on up. There's no sense of the real sage of just saying, I've done it, but that's because I'm very special. The sage the awakened sage is only about wishing that others follow their example. The Tibetan word for life story is namtar, which means perfect liberation. And this actually implies that the life story is not just a narrative that's there to show how great somebody was in the sense of being idolized and so forth, but it's almost like an invitation. It's an instruction. This is how it can be done. Of course, everybody's going to do it in their own particular way, but this is an invitation saying this can be done. One way is like that. And of course, there will be universal themes that apply to everybody. Everybody has to work with their insecurities, self-centering, their attachment to the self, their projections. And so, in fact, what we come across in the life story of great masters is our universal themes of things that apply to us as well. So this longing faith is then wishing to follow in the footsteps of these beings. Confident faith comes through practicing the Dharma when we acquire complete confidence in the truth of the teaching and the enlightenment of the Buddha. So this is where we begin to have some sense of where this is heading and having the satisfaction and the increased confidence. Finally, when faith has become so, then this is Yichi, what's it again? Dawe Deba. What is it again? Derbe, longing faith. Dawe Deba. I forget what this one is here, longing faith. This is Yicheki Deba, and then finally we have Chirme Dope Deba, yeah? I forget what longing faith is. Derbe Deba? Something like that? Anyway. Finally, when faith has become so much a part of ourselves that even if our lives were at risk, we would never give it up. It has become irreversible faith. So, of course, we often see in the scriptures, even somebody's threatening your life, then, you're not going to give up the 3 jewels. Presumably, you could probably verbally give them up. You might sort of calm them down a bit, but at the same time, if in the heart, your heart of hearts, there is this sense that this is where the ultimate solution lies in the 3 jewels and so forth, then that is then the irreversible faith. Faith is the foundation underlying all Dharma practice. There is no practice, even Mahamudra or Dzogchen, which does not rely on faith in the 3 jewels. Refuge is the foundation and starting point. When its meaning is more deeply understood, it is also the ultimate goal, the realization of the Buddha within. Therefore, from now until you reach enlightenment, taking refuge should be an integral part of your practice. So, taking refuge, we continually then fall back on this. Having taken refuge is that things can go one way or another, but there is this foundation in our life. And as Khyentse Rinpoche, when he was giving refuge in Australia a few years ago, said, the most important really is to understand that our confusion is removable, that we're not stuck with our confusion, we're not stuck with our particular patterns. And so for that, then of course there is the formal practice of taking refuge in terms of the daily chanting of the refuge formula and so forth. But the real meaning of it is then this confidence. So this is the chapter on refuge. Any questions? Who did Buddha take refuge in? That's such a good question. We say that the Buddha is you could say, unique, as he was somebody who didn't have a teacher. But at the same time, as far as our understanding of what is the scope of enlightenment goes, we could say that the Buddha took refuge in truth. And of course, in our postmodern relativistic context, then we very often sort of say, oh, there is no truth, but there is the reality. If you were to say that your statement, there is no truth, is valid, that means you believe that's true. So we operate with truth all the time, this is my aunt, Louisa, this is my Uncle Freddie, and so forth, right? That's true. We have relative truth. So relative truth applies all the time. Also, there is the absolute truth, and that is where in the Buddhist teaching we talk about the the validity of the Vipassana, the freedom from conceptual constructs, the reality of the Dhamma Dhatu, so forth. So this is what the Buddha took refuge in when he sat under the tree, which was very interesting and very significant, because at that point he had already been following paths. He had been, you could say, having reference points. He was still sustaining duality. So when the Buddha sat down under the tree, he sat down with the courage to relinquish all reference points and simply just take refuge in or surrender to reality. And at that point, he said, I will not move until I have completely seen the truth. So that trust in the nature of reality, and ultimately really in his own wisdom, this was then the Buddha's refuge. I'm sure this can be explained in different ways, but that's what comes to mind right now. So in the Zen tradition, yes, then the Zen people, they will say killing the Buddha. They will say if you meet the Buddha on the road, then they'll say kill him. Now this this is definitely sort of shocking for you could say the from the point of view of conventional truth. But from the point of view of wishing to shock the student into relinquishing the notion that Buddha is outside, the teachers, like in the Zen tradition, in the Chan tradition, they would say things like that. Don't think the Buddha is outside. If you find the Buddha outside, you've gone wrong. Just, take him out. So the understanding of truth as innate can then be prompted by statements like that. Killing the Buddha, yes, that is taking refuge in truth. Yeah. Okay. So this is the first section in the ngöndro, the taking refuge. And then extending the refuge beyond just the wish to be liberated ourselves. And what's also implicit, of course, in the way that we take refuge in the Mahayana is that we're taking refuge with the thought of all sentient beings. And ultimately also with the understanding that the taking refuge in truth is going beyond any dualistic reference point. And so from that point of view, the mind or the aspiration goes beyond just finding a place of peace for me. It goes beyond any dualistic constructs, and as such, no longer holding on to the sense of just my enlightenment or my peace or my protection. Then, with that falling away, then there naturally is the caring, spontaneous caring for others. There's no longer the sort of the focus on self, rather there's a focusing that goes beyond self and other. So it's caring for all of reality, of course, oneself, but no longer with the sort of the boundaries between self and other. Then this also extends to all sentient beings. And so then the bodhicitta is then the thought of more than just my limited salvation. It is the intention then to engage with all of reality, all sentient beings, without any limitations. So we say until we actually have bodhicitta, we can't really attain perfect enlightenment. We're not really connected. It's only when there is the connecting with reality that goes beyond me, then there's the falling away of this tension of me and mine, and the suffering and the pain that goes with this. And there's the softness that all of a sudden sympathizes with all of reality. And that's then the quality of the bodhisattva way that ultimately leads to complete enlightenment. So bodhicitta, Khyentse Rinpoche says, is the thought of achieving enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And also Shantideva says this, bodhicitta is the wish to establish all sentient beings on the level of enlightenment. It is this great and all-embracing attitude that distinguishes the great vehicle or Mahayana, which is what we are practicing here, from the lesser vehicle or Hinayana, and that gives it the name great. So when we are talking about the Hinayana, it's a Mahayana expression that identifies the scope of the foundational vehicle. So everybody is naturally a Hinayanist, and then gradually we develop beyond that to become Mahayanist. But this is, of course, from the Mahayana perspective. And like I'm also always want to make a point, we shouldn't identify Hinayana with necessarily particular traditions and so on, saying these people. We don't know who's a Hinayana and Mahayanist, because it's ultimately really about the personal journey. So there's a place where the journey becomes great, and that is then where we are now, when we arrive at this wish to establish all beings in perfect enlightenment. There are two levels of bodhicitta: absolute bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta also has two aspects or stages, which are bodhicitta as aspiration and bodhicitta as action. Now, absolute bodhicitta, Khyentse Rinpoche says there's two levels of bodhicitta: absolute bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Absolute is reality as it is. That's beyond any reference point, any notion of this or that. We could also say it's beyond any notion of sentient beings and Buddhas. It's the unconditional truth that is without any conceptual reference. And this is then the absolute bodhicitta, but its natural condition, this freedom from any reference points, its natural condition is warmth, is this luminous brilliance. So its quality naturally is also, you could say, embracing all sentient beings. But in terms of its nature, it's without any reference point whatsoever. It's the mind which settles into its natural condition. Now, for the time being, we're caught up in some confusion that experiences this or that, a me in relation to the other, long, short, tall, not tall, and so forth, left and right. So we have, depending on where we are, particular perspectives. We would say that's relative bodhicitta, our reality according to us. So that's relative bodhicitta. Now, so that's where right now we want to discuss a little bit understanding relative bodhicitta within our experience. There is two kinds of bodhicitta, which is the bodhicitta where we think, may all sentient beings, may I be able to establish all sentient beings in happiness and freedom from suffering. That's the aspiration. And then there's bodhicitta as action, actually doing it. Khyentse Rinpoche says, absolute bodhicitta is the realization that the ultimate nature of all phenomena is emptiness. But this is not so easy to understand in the beginning. So in order to realize absolute bodhicitta, one needs first to cultivate relative bodhicitta. Now, when we come to the path, we actually want to understand what is the nature of reality, and that is where we need to understand what is emptiness. What do we mean that non-duality? What do we mean lack of reference point? And all these kind of questions into the nature of reality. So, particularly then in the modern world, we come with this natural disposition of wishing to analyze. So that's indispensable, and that is again where it applies, where we shouldn't just accept the Buddhist teaching on the basis of faith, but on the basis of our own inquiry. But at the same time also, as far as we are concerned in terms of our emotional, actual person, So not forget about the philosophy or the insight or the ontological vision that we might have, coming down to where we are, who we are emotionally, in terms of our immediate, you can say, everyday experience of ourselves in relation to the world. Then we need to cop to the fact that we have duality. We do think in terms of self and other, and that is where we need to cultivate relative bodhicitta, where we need to engage this present dualistic relative perspective. So that's where we begin with taking the bodhisattva vow, the commitment to this greater vision, this greater path. Khyentse Rinpoche says, to take the bodhisattva vow, to generate bodhicitta, one needs first a witness, such as one's teacher or an image of the Buddha. In this particular practice, here in the ngöndro, one takes the bodhisattva vow in front of Guru Rinpoche, surrounded by the refuge assembly, as described earlier. In the presence of the object of refuge, visualize yourself alone this time, because it is you who are making the promise to work for the sake of all beings. And then recite. So in front of the refuge, just as we visualized it in taking a refuge, then with the refuge as the witness to the vow that we now take, we chant, to obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of others, I generate bodhicitta as aspiration, as action, and in its absolute meaning. So this is the vision of enlightenment, that it's not just enlightenment for me, but it's enlightenment that relinquishes this isolated situation of us clinging to ourselves and all the trouble that comes from that. Awakening from that will be benefit for ourselves and for others. So with that vastness, that this sort of great scope, then we generate then this determination to persevere in the path of bodhicitta. And that has then again these aspects, there's the aspiration and the action, that's relative bodhicitta, and then there's the absolute meaning, absolute bodhicitta. So in front of the object of refuge, we make this statement, we make this commitment, we take this vow. What is the essence of bodhicitta and why do we need it? Sentient beings circle endlessly in the three realms of samsara because of three obscuring emotions. Attachment, we also say desire, aversion or hatred, and then ignorance. These three, attachment, aversion, ignorance. That is what comes from this isolated sense of me. Then we happy, not happy, and all of that is based on a ground of confusion, ignorance. Khyentse Rinpoche says, Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha, is naturally present in every sentient being, but beings fail to recognize it and fall into delusion. So we naturally possess a nature that's free from this attachment, aversion, and ignorance. But failing to recognize it, we fall into delusion. This is ignorance, the very root of samsara. Now, all sentient beings are innocent. They haven't done anything wrong, but they've just been confused. Just like when we, in a dream, fail to recognize that it's a dream, we are completely caught up in what we're experiencing. It's not because we're naughty or because we have to be punished. It's just because we don't recognize the dream as a dream. The chief manifestation of this ignorance is the ego, or the thought of I. Once such a thought has occurred, one conceives my body, my mind, my name. But actually the thought of I assumes the existence of something that does not exist at all. So our reference point, coming back to me, is actually what we call a non-existent. We could say that all of the phenomena we see around us, they're all based on causes and conditions. They function, they don't have any inherent existence, but they do appear to have some relative existence. Whereas the self, actually we cannot find anything. We cannot find anything there. It's a non-existent. It's a complete delusion. At present, Khyentse Rinpoche says, we have this aggregation of various elements which we call the body. As long as the mind and the body remain together, the various sense consciousnesses perceive outer phenomena. So we have this sense of I, and then we have this sense of my body, and then when we have this me within the body, then we also have the perceptions of the world around us. And this is really what constitutes the experience of a sentient being. This sense of I and my body and the world that I'm living in. Thus we see forms, hear sounds, smell odors, taste flavors, and feel objects. Conceiving of an ego, we cling to the concept of a self-existent individual. Perceiving the outer world, we cling to the concept of self-existent phenomena. So there we have what's called the two kinds of selves. We think in terms of me, my individual person, and then we also project solidity onto the phenomena outside. That's what we call self of phenomena. So we have self of person, self of phenomena. That's where we solidify something in a way that it doesn't actually exist. That's where we're delusional. We can't do proper science. We can't see straight. We can't actually understand what reality is as long as we have this deluded projection about solidity of me and solidity of other. And we can see we function much better when we are not clinging on to me and when we're not stuck on our projections about other. We are much better, much more skillful, much more sort of smooth in terms of relating to the world. There's more sense of humor. There's more understanding, sympathy, compassion when we don't have these rigid projections of me and onto where we also solidify other. So in that way, we are operating within a realm of delusion. That is samsara. It's based on this conceiving of the ego and then the way that we cling to the phenomena of ego. Khyentse Rinpoche goes on to say, while we are alive, the mind and body operate together. We also have a name. So we have the mind and body and sense of me. When we start examining these three, body, mind, and name, we can easily see that they're all mere labels devoid of any intrinsic reality. So these three, they have some relative functionality. If you've been following the rest in the nature of mind, we've gone into some depth in that they are mere labels, that although they are just labels, then they do have some functionality in some relative sense. There's the name, there's the Jakob, somebody says Jakob, I say yes, and certainly I'm very attached to body and mind. And also if somebody says Jakob is, he's a moron, then I'm profoundly offended. So there's a strong attachment to both the mind, the body, and also our name. Let us examine the body first. It is made up of different components: skin, blood, bones, flesh, and organs. If we separate these components, putting the skin on one side, the bones on the other, and so on, with the blood and organs, we cannot then call the skin alone the body. So we have this body. This is definitely a sense of my body. But let's look at the various parts. We cannot call the blood alone the body, the skin. None of these constituents alone can be referred to as the body itself. None of them can be said to contain any kind of essential bodiness. So the body is merely a label attached to an aggregation of disparate elements that remain together for a while. So also if these different parts, if this was my body, then this was my body, then already there I have two different bodies. So it's really just a label, right? And also when this is no longer alive, when there's no longer a mind present in it, that's just a corpse. We would say it's the finger of a corpse, but it's like we almost already there have a clear sense that this is not really what a body is. That's just a deceased body. So logically speaking, we can say that all these different things are the body would end up with a whole lot of different bodies. And also in terms of our sort of experience, we can say this, how do you say, inanimate body is not really a body as we understand it. So in fact, what we have, particularly from the point of view of analyzing that none of the individual parts of the body is the body, then Khyentse Rinpoche says, body is not something with a real existence of its own. There is no such entity as a body, a single thing that we'd say, this is the body. Yet because one believes it is my body, and we do, right? I pinch this, I have a sense that's my body, and also I pinch here, I also sense that's my body. So one feels greatly attracted to what feels pleasurable, and tries at all costs to avoid what it finds unpleasant. One also clings to the notion of my mind, but if one attempts to search for this mind, one cannot find it anywhere. It is not located in the brain, in the heart, in the skin, or anywhere else in the body. Now, this kind of analysis we have all across the board in Buddhism. It is to penetrate this delusion that attaches solidity to this notion of self, when in fact what we have is a set of conditions, causes and conditions, that together we have what's called a dependent arising. But that does not possess any inherent unchanging nature. It's in flux. It's constantly changing according to causes and conditions. So this applies both to the body and to the mind. So when we look for the mind, we cannot find it anywhere. It is not located in the brain, in the heart, in the skin, or anywhere else in the body. It has no particular shape. It is not round, square, or oblong. It has no particular color. It is neither solid nor insubstantial. So again, mind is merely a name attached to endless thoughts which constantly flow one after another, just as rosary is a name given to 100 beads threaded together. So we have a composite, a dependent arising that we label as a unit which it in fact doesn't have. Just like rosary is, the mala is a name given to these 100 individual beads that are just sitting together. Now this we might think, is this sophistry? Is this just being clever? No, it's not. It's for us to actually take relief. It's for us to put down a heavy burden of trying to, this insecure project of holding on to things that we can't. We cannot hold on to this body. We know that. It's a burden to have strong attachment to our body, to our name, to our mind. So this analysis is not intended to sort of be something intelligent or mystical. It's really just for us to have relief